Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way.
Lee Taituha, welcome to the Good Oil Podcast.
Cam, good to meet you. Congratulations on the show.
Thank you. You're going to be lucky, episode 10.
Wicked.
Yeah,
It's a good number, eh?
it is. Now, unfortunately, we're not allowed to smoke cigars, and I know you enjoy smoking cigars, just like I do.
I love it.
Why did you get started smoking cigars?
Well, I decided to start thinking about really serious things in my life. I decided that I needed to take the time to compile what I'd learnt the last 50 years. I've just recently turned 50. I've got 4 children, 26, 12, 6, 2, and a new one coming this month in July.
Haven't you got a TV?
Plenty of TV too. Huh? And so I suppose it was during COVID. You know, we all had time to think. And I just felt, look, there's something good got to come out of this. And so I really wanted to, not as if I searched after cigar smoking. I just had one and I thought, this is good. And so what it is because it's so bloody dear in this country, I've got to go really slowly with it because I'm watching it go down $5, $10, going like this, and it's so bloody expensive. We're going to get rid of those regulations. And it caused me to sit there for probably 2, even sometimes 3 hours just to stop and think. And I've found it's been great for my health. I found I can still exercise. I run every day. I go and run the local domain down there. If I can still move when I'm 50, I thought, well, that's good. I'm better than my relations I knew when I was growing up at 50. But the cigar smoking to me has been about taking time, a commitment to time to think. It's also a financial commitment because you don't want to bugger around with it. And I've just found it's my partner hates it, and I'm the only one in my family. I don't know any other cigar smokers in my life. So they don't want to sit next to me anyway. So I'm always on my own. So it's a solitary type thing as well.
It is. I mean, I started cigar smoking for similar reasons, although it came about for me shortly after I had my stroke. I was 49 when I had my stroke, just a few days short of my 50th birthday. I had my 50th birthday in hospital. And I discovered that to increase neuroplasticity, which gives your brain more flexibility, all the little arteries and veins and things that run through your brain, they can get brittle with age. And then when you add in high blood pressure or stress or something like that, it shatters and you end up having a stroke. And it can be catastrophic, and very often people don't recover from them. They spend their most productive years crippled. And I was sitting there in hospital with, my right arm didn't move. It was sort of just hanging down the side. And I discovered that one of the best things to improve neuroplasticity, improve mental acuity as a result of the neuroplasticity improving, was nicotine. And so then I investigated ways to get nicotine into me in the large quantities in the shortest amount of time. Patches didn't really cut it. Cigarettes are disgusting, but I did like cigars, so I started cigar and pipe smoking, because pipe tobacco, you smoke pipes the same way you smoke cigars. You don't take it into your lungs. And so what I found is that even the smallest cigar will take you about an hour to smoke. And I prefer cigars that are 5 to 6 inches long. And a decent ring size. And in my cigars, there's often more nicotine in one cigar than there is in a packet of cigarettes. And so that was how I got nicotine into my body. That's how I started my recovery. And you're right. I would spend an hour to 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, just smoking and contemplating. And I think that it made me a better political commentator, because instead of reacting, I would pause, think about it, war game it, plan out where it was going to go, where things were heading, and it made me a better observer of the game of politics, which I love. And so that's why I started smoking cigars, was for, same as you, relaxation. Of course, it is dear as poison, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where you get them from. You can't dodge the taxes.
Yep.
I know a guy down in Napier, and he decided he'd try and dodge the taxes, and ended up with $100,000 bill for the large number of cigars that he brought in. So you just got to suck it up. I don't smoke Cuban cigars. Everyone goes, "Oh, you have a nice Cuban." Well, there's no such thing as a nice Cuban, in my view.
Unreliable, eh?
They're unreliable. They've never really changed since the 1950s.
Yep.
A lot of the good cigar manufacturers in Cuba left once Castro took over, and they went to places like Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and they're called New World cigars.
Yeah.
And those New World cigars are
Just
very
good, mate.
varied. They're better. My in my humidor, I have a box of Opus X cigars, and that's what I use to celebrate milestones. Just right, I'm going to have an Opus X now, and I sit there and I smoke it. But there's lots of different ones. One of my favorites, because you always get people who say, "Oh, yeah, oh, you got cigars. I wouldn't mind having a cigar." I say, "Oh, do you smoke cigars?" "Oh, yeah, I love cigars." And then I say, "Okay, well, we'll start with a little one." And it doesn't really matter the size, but these ones are called Weaselitos. Right. I bought a box of them of 100 cigars, and they're just little short. They're almost like cigarillos, open ended at both ends, but they are little bombs, right? And you give someone one of these Weaselitos, and you soon see if they're a cigar smoker or not, because they start reeling and their blood sugars plummet. That's the thing people don't realize, right?
Oh, hey, look,
Nicotine plummets your blood sugars. And so people say, "Oh, I started smoking a cigar, and after about 15 minutes, I was sitting there gasping, 'Oh, I can't smoke this anymore.'" I said, "Oh, your blood sugars dropped. What you needed was a can of Coke. And then you can carry on smoking."
Yeah, I love it with a nice
Or a bourbon.
bourbon on the rocks, or a nice rum,
Yeah.
even a glass of wine, scotch. But whatever is, it's the commitment to the time, and but also too, look, I've got a postgraduate degree in biology and anatomy and physiology. All the stuff you hear about about all the
Nicotine.
it's all bullshit, man.
Yeah, I know it is.
And so, but however, does people imagine just a big fat cigarette? It's not. This is an investment in financially and your time. And I've just found I needed because I've got I think a lot, and I needed a opportunity really to compile really the last 30 years of ideas and thinking, lessons learnt, mistakes made. And I've just found by having that, but not one off. Like, I don't smoke them, and I suppose that's the downside. They're so bloody dear. Every day if I could.
You know why they're so dear?
Yeah, I want to talk about that and get rid of those bloody regulations.
Yeah, basically tobacco tax is based on the weight of tobacco.
Yeah.
And a cigar is,
And I like the big ones, bro.
yeah.
The 60s, as long as the bigger they get. So
Yeah.
I haven't tried that many. Yeah, I'm quite envious of you, mate, with a 600 humidor.
Yeah,
Bloody hell.
600 cigars.
Next one at your place, bro.
Yeah, so in a cigar, there's only tobacco in a cigar.
Yeah.
There's no other chemicals, there's no other things, it's just tobacco, including the wrapper.
Here's another thing I think about when I'm smoking it. The couple of hundred hands of those hardworking people in the Nicaragua or Dominican Republic, Honduras, or wherever they are, that's their life, man.
Yeah.
And I like to, when I first started smoking, I'd smoke and put up a podcast or a video on YouTube of where it came from.
Yes.
And I just see all the hands involved in it, and these people and the cigar companies building hospitals and schools in these third world countries. Gives me a little bit more. I go, yeah, this is a good reason. But really, ultimately, it's selfish. I love the solitude. I love the time to think. And I just imagine that when I draw it, and I'd like to just, I can see it coming out, and I'm going, yeah, there goes all the mistakes, and let's bring in some good ideas.
Yeah, but mistakes help generate good ideas, right? You don't learn to ride a bike straight off. You always come off, you always hurt yourself. You couldn't ride a skateboard without coming off and scarfing your knees and your elbows and your bonds,
Yeah, man.
that's how you learn, by making mistakes. A stupid person makes the same mistakes over and over and over again. A smart person learns from them and develops policy or ideas or things like that.
Yeah, mate.
And
Totally with you.
and so having that time just allows you to relax. You're right. You just feel your body relax. All of the tension comes out. It comes out in me. It's out of my shoulders and my chest.
Right.
And then the ideas start flowing. And I credit cigar smoking with making me a better political commentator, a better analyst of what we see happening in things around the world or things in politics.
Mate, I think if everyone that we would call a leader, if they all sat there and invested in a cigar, they would at least have to sit there for 2
Well,
hours.
that's one of my policies, right? The personal policies that I want to enact. I want to, Helen Cart brought in the smoke-free environment, nasty, busybody type things saying that you can't have these pleasures in your own home or anywhere else. But since that came in, we've had poor decision making in politics.
Yep.
We've had knee-jerk reactions to things. We haven't had sensible discussions across the political divide over a cigar and a scotch.
Yep.
And I think we need to bring back smoke-filled rooms. I can remember all of the discussions that I've had with politicians in the early days in the 90s when I was deeply involved in and sitting in literal smoke-filled rooms, coming to discussions. I think our decision-making was better back then because it was more considered. It was more relaxed.
Yeah, and be grown up about it. We're adults.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. I'm not going to have it around my wife won't even let me around them anyway. So I'm out, not only out on the deck, I'm outside way the hell out. Yeah, in the middle of winter. Hey, I've got my beanie on, bro. I'm sitting there freezing the hell outside, but you stay out there. But I know what you mean. It's that the style of leadership that I've seen in the last 30 years is nowhere near. It's like a totally opposite to how I grew up. The people I grew up with were contemplative. They were courageous. They were
vocal.
Yeah, exactly. And you could lay out your ideas. That's the purpose of the pipeline, to lay out an idea and you have a better one come in the other way and you argue about it backwards and forwards. But now it's just turned into just PC. It's just like the idea of sitting in there as adults and taking the time. And I'm not suggesting everybody smoke bloody cigars. I'm just saying take the bloody time to stop and think and put the adults in the room. And what's happened the last 30 years
I think this is a constant theme coming up in my podcast.
Right.
Last week sitting in your seat was Chris Trotter. Now, him and I don't agree on politics. He is a good old-fashioned cloth cap socialist. He has reasons for that. I respect those reasons for that. But we can sit and talk across the divide because we've got that mutual respect for each other's ideas. And polarization has lost the art of that political conversation.
Yep.
And we need to bring back that political conversation to the center so that we can have a sharing of ideas that, like I said to Chris Trotter, we probably agree on 80% of things, on where we want to be. The things that we don't agree on is how we get to those
Yep.
goals, right? He would agree that the state needs to have more involvement, and I would agree the state needs to have less involvement, but we still want the same things at the end of the day. We probably agree on 10% and have a bit stronger argument about how we're going to get there. And then there's probably 10% that doesn't really matter, that we're never going to agree on. And if you can agree on 80% with another 10% with some, witty banter to sort it out, then we're on the same page pretty much.
Just sitting there and going, how's the family, mate?
Yeah.
Just starting like that. Because that's I'm sitting here with you, talking with you, but I'm here to deliver a message. But for me, it all comes down to the reason I'm living, the reason I'm doing everything I'm doing, why I'm here today with you, what I want to talk about is for my kids' future. And if you can put that there, then the other stuff a bonus stuff like, okay, what's our policy around that? What,
Mm.
you know, should we have it written down, or should we just have these judges guess and say what they, you know? But that's out on the fringes. But I agree with you, Cam. If we can get get the adults back in the room, because as you get older, all the bullshit tends to just get less and less and less, and you get very much more focused. And by me sitting there every afternoon for a couple of hours, then I go to bed early and I'll get up, say 3, 4 in the morning. It's been my way most of my life. I do a lot of thinking in the middle of the night
Mm.
because there's less light. So
Distraction.
yeah, and so by the time I'm getting up the next day, I know I've at least had an attempt of, as one of my idols, Einstein, said, now if you repeat the same mistake, that's stupidity. And at least I can say, well, and as a youngster getting encouraged to learn science and economics as a kid, was the idea of testing all your good intentions against reality. You know, and just saying, here's an idea I got, let's see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you throw it out. As my chiefs would say, "Whiatu tira me roto tipu para me timata no." Right? Throw your bloody bad ideas out into the rubbish bin and start again. Don't even, it's not like, oh, well, let's just be PC and nice around the edges. No, if it doesn't work, you throw it out. Otherwise, you're leaving it and you're just handing the same bullshit to your kids in the future,
The scientific method is not changed.
Yeah.
Right? You test and test and test and repeat the test and continue to repeat the test. There's no such thing as the science is settled,
Absolutely.
except when it comes to climate change. I hear that science is settled. Well, there's no such thing.
No, that's science is not science. The idea of the scientific process is that it is not settled. That's why you're doing it. Yeah, that's the purpose, is to say, no, I thought I was right. Let's have a test it again. Let's test it again.
Yeah, see,
Let's test it
how
again.
about you test it and see if I've got it right?
Yeah. And that's how I grew. Like what I can put a pin on it for you, Cam, is the last 30 years in particular, because I came into the academy as a youngster. I wonderful family. My parents, my father, particularly my grandfather, were very much, you're going to get an education. My grandfather on my father's side and my grandfather on my mother's side.
You're going to get an education, or I'll get you a hiding.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like I said to my grandfather, who's a truck driver, I saw New Zealand in the cab of a Mack truck when I was a kid. And I said, man, Papa, I want to be a truck driver. Bullshit, you're going to go to university. And I went, university? What the hell's that? None of our family had even sat school C at that point. But they had a vision, and they realized what they hadn't done. And then on my father's side, my grandfather on my father's side was heavily involved in the Kingitanga, and for the one purpose. The purpose then for those chiefs then was to unite all people in this country, not just the tribes. Because we can do that. Yeah, bring it, but the idea is to bring everybody together. So I had great chiefs, great leaders. Like we'd be there at the pa, and the rations would come home for a tangi from Aussie, and they turn up, oh, where are we going to get the meat from? The Pākehā farmer next door. That's where. Yeah, and it was right there too. And he's coming over with it now. Now here's a knife. You know how to skin it? Oh, no, I've been living in Perth for 20 years. Well, here we are. Yeah. And that's how I had grown up. But I was fortunate that I had that guidance young with my grandfathers and my father. No son had better men in his life than me. And they were like, no, we've got to take this further, and we're looking for you to do this. So as a youngster, I always had in my mind, shit, okay, I've got to be thinking about something a bit different than just what my mates are and just from what I'm seeing. So, I look back as a youngster, it was mostly old people I was around. Like I grew up with one of my nannies, my grandmother, my grand auntie, she was about in the 80s or 90s, hardly spoke English. I remember coming home with my maths homework. And so on Nana, can you help me with this? Karia te mohi mo te rā ahua, which means I didn't know how to read. But you make sure you do. And so that's how I grew up. Now, your audience will be hearing this and going, well, this doesn't bloody sound like today. Where's all those Māoris?
Yeah, where are they?
They're all gone, bro. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, about how we bring back that Maori is conservative. Conserve the language, yeah, conserve the relationships, conserve the whenua. But what I grew up with, my leaders, my youngsters, I was a youngster, their speech and how they communicate was, it was like everything was a growling. It was like very staccato in their kōrero. Kaui mahi pēnā. E te wara wara koe ki tēnā. They were very like that because they had no time for bullshit. Because they're older, And so I grew up like that, and I've been able to tell, I think, since a young man, is that what's right, what's wrong, that moral foundation and compass that I had in my life was wrong, and it came from both sides of my whakapapa. From my Irish and Croatian and my Tainui, Waikato side. So, and I was there living with people
Who spoke their mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And so I always, and so they weren't scared to what I call whakatika, or to correct. They wouldn't say, oh, we better, he's only young, or we better be nice.
So that's a problem with New Zealand, isn't it? We've got a general populace that go along to get along.
Yeah.
Right? We saw that with COVID, right? Where everyone, this is where this kindness bullshit came from, right?
Yeah.
And it was all about go along to get along.
Yep.
I had a different upbringing to you, right? But very similar. I was always surrounded by older people. My grandma was very wise. My grandfather was hilarious. He always cracked a joke or whatever. But in our house, there were always senior people in New Zealand society, from MPs to ministers to prime ministers. I'd say the people I've met and spoken to and entertained, or been around every prime minister from Rob Muldoon, including Rob Muldoon, to the present day. Every single one of them I've either met them, I've had lunch with them, dinner with them, been at a function with them, whatever, discussed with them in the back rooms of politics. And go back to the cigar smoking. I think that's where the problem lies in our politics, this lack of smoke-filled rooms.
You could sit there with a $60 cigar, right? And you've just lit it, and you realise the one you're talking to is a prick, but you still got a $60 cigar to smoke. So maybe there's a chance. What else you want to talk about, bro? Should we do it? Well, what can we agree on? How's the kids?
We've got 2 hours to go. You're smoking a cigar too. We're here to find something here.
Yeah. You're big government, I'm little government, but we both got kids, eh? And we can sort of sit there and, but it's not as if they. That's the thing. That's the nub of the whole thing. We've replaced what works with what sounds good. And what my elders, in a way, are very scientific. Is say, you see over there, if you put that hangi down there and you pull it out too early, you don't put those stones on for long enough, you come out, you get raw, and I get a whack. Don't you put a raw hangi in front of most visitors coming over? Because so it was very, it was the
scientific jandal.
Yeah, that's why it was like the scientific process is to compare your good intentions with what actually happens, not what you'd like to happen, but what actually happens. And so it was like a fait accompli. When I came of age as a youngster, I left school, and I loved economics and science. I pretended not to, because all my relations hated school. I was the only one that didn't get expelled. And I was sitting there, and they go, yeah. I remember my dad. We'd sit amongst all my, like some of my mates who got kicked out of school, and just trouble, eh? And then my dad would sit there, and we'd have a laugh. Because his mates would go, bro, my boy got expelled today. They're having a rum at the pub. Oh, Dad would laugh and go home and go, fucking egg. Dad would go home and say, why don't you do that? You stand up and you do something. Don't you work? Don't you turn out like that? But then we go back out in town again. That's right. But when I left home, and my grandfather, who died in 93, it was the year I left and started university that year. He introduced me to Te Ara Ki-Nui, the Maori Queen, and they had a big job to do. They were negotiating a treaty settlement, and there I was, a young 18-year-old kid, coming out just wanting to go and play music. I'm a muso, and he's, no, I want you to go and, here, come shake hands with uncle. Everyone's uncle, hey. Shake hands with the uncle. Who's this one? All right, uncle here. Sit down there. It's Robert Mahuta sitting there going, well, he's negotiating the settlement with Doug Graham and them all.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with these fellas. The Te Ariki Nui's making a cup of tea. And I'm sitting there just going, what the hell am I doing here? But they recognized if we don't train our young people to have these morals and these values and to do this, we're going to end up in war for generations. Now, Te Ariki Nui said to me, if I jump ahead near the end of my postgraduate research, she said, and I'll never forget it, and I suppose this is the nub of, I think everything good that's happened in my life since then came from her. And it wasn't just because she was the Maori queen. It's not about that. She was just wise.
Mm.
And she was surrounded by elders too, her whole life, prepared for that role. And she said, Lee, ko tahi noi ho, oh, not Lee, boy, ko tahi noi ho, ko tahi noi ho te atua. There's only one God for all people. Now, bring all the people together. So the idea of having a country where everybody can work together was what the purpose was.
Isn't that what the purpose of the treaty was?
Yeah. Well, here's another thing I say about that particularly. That it wasn't just me too that she taught this. She said this treaty ain't who we are. This treaty is not who we are. It's and there was a real reluctance in her and in Sir Robert in signing it. I remember going to some of the prelim meetings because it was established at that time if we signed, then all the others would follow that precedent. So I ended up having to carry Robert's a bag around the country. Oh, so some meetings here in Auckland and stuff, meeting with some of the other tribes. And he was basically going out saying, well, look, looks like we're going to sign this, and I'll just come here to talk with you all to let you know what this might mean for you fellas. Right? And they'd sit there, how much money we get? And when do we get the river back? And I remember him saying to me on the way out, I was going, because I was only young, carrying a bag, sitting there at this meeting with all these chiefs from all these tribes. And he said what he needed to say. And he walked out, he says, bro, boy, those fellas aren't going to move ahead at all. Carried on driving. I was shocked. He's saying, what these Maoris need to do, boy, is spend less time looking at themselves and more time looking out the window. Because he understood when he went to Oxford, he was King of Koroki sent him over there to get an education. When he went there, he could see that heritage too. I mean, these buildings are old.
Would have been, go back even before Bob Mahuta, right?
Oh, absolutely. His
Saparananada, all of the, you had from Hongihika onwards, Maori traveling to England and seeing these, imagine sailing into the harbour in the UK to get to London and seeing all of these ships, this massive city, these big bridges and tall buildings, even seeing the Tower of London, that was built in, after 1066. Maori had nothing like that.
Oh,
that would have
at Oxford,
assured them.
That Oxfordshire, ironically, in our town in Pure, we've got a big sail yard there. That's what Oxford was. Oxford. Yep. It was a sail yards where they gather their cattle, right. And that's built. We're talking about 10, 20 or something. They had the first classroom there. But what I'm saying about Bob is that because he was there at that time in my life, but it was very much so when I was there, and Te Ariki Nui, she was in charge. Not a lot of people realised that. They thought, oh, it's a woman. She doesn't speak on the pa. No way, bro. She cracked the whip behind the scenes, man. She put her speakers out the front. You do this. And she said to them all, and I remember her saying to them and me, ko tahi noi ho te atua, ko tahi noi ho te atua. Yeah, we're all people. She saw her role as a unifier. Now, because Robert was there at the time, but the reference points for me went right back. So she would, like for instance, he goes, come back with a master's proposal, because we're going to get an education scholarship going, but we want to get the eels back, but we want to set up an economic basis, right? And set out the real terms of trade, right? And my great-great-great-great-grandfather had the first bank in New Zealand in 1886, Ke Pēkau Aotearoa. New Zealand didn't get a bank till 1934. Find out what the hell that was about, And I found out, he established the bank, he was trading with the settlers, and it all fell to pieces because of his own relations. The settlers were into it.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to get away from the crown too.
It's far better to trade than it is to fight.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's what so there I am as a young sort of 21-year-old just finishing my undergrad, sitting there now getting guidance here from the fellow who's negotiating the settlement, saying, forget, and the Te Ariki Nui saying, forget this bloody thing. We're moving on. This is not who we are. My grandfather said to me at the time, this was in 93, the most important thing about that settlement was the apology. Sorry, yeah, sweet, sorry, shake hands, move on.
Yeah.
And that's what he demanded there be in there. The land and the assets and everything else wasn't really that important. But
It provided an economic base that you could then grow.
yeah, he said we lost the totara, but we got a seed to plant to grow up into a forest. But that attitude there was how I grew up. So I was very conservative as a youngster. Then came to uni, went completely bloody woke. It's almost impossible to be a Maori at uni at that time and not go woke. Because I turned up there and they said, well, boy, you got this big fresh scholarship and you're Maori, you're special. I go, shit, am I? Okay. And, you know, and because I was funded right the way through. I was really got it the way through, but there was that sense of entitlement that came to me. I thought, oh, okay, choice. And I looked at my Pākehā and I said, hey, bro, you got all your fees paid. Yeah. And I said, I thought that's how it's supposed to work. And I understood. And as time went on in there, I realized, and I became an academic, became a research scientist. Then I became a dean and a head of school in the Polytech system in New Zealand. And I realized where the rot had set in the last 30 years. It's in education.
Absolutely,
The
it's an
academy.
education. Yeah.
Because they affect what teachers teach. They affect what journalists talk about. Everything comes from how you educate your youth. And so I've been plodding away there now the last 30 years going, yeah, none of it's worked. I would love to say to you, Cam, well, I think I could tweak this here and tweak that there and bugger around with that there like what everybody else is doing. I don't hear anything that I'm going to lay out to you coming from anywhere else. They're just tweaking around with the bloody treaty, bugging around, even saying it all this. And I'm saying like my koro used to say, whio atu tērā mea I roto te ipu para me, tīmata anō. If it doesn't work, throw the bloody thing out. Otherwise, it's going to curse your kids.
It's like a dog that won't hunt, right?
Yeah.
They all get the same thing.
Yeah.
They get a bullet.
So what I thought, well, okay, if I'm going to say throw the bloody thing out, I better come up with another option. And otherwise, I'll end up like, not your one though, bro. I'll end up like all those other podcasters sitting around whinging about life. I want to talk about solutions.
So I don't try not to whinge about things. I just want to have a conversation with people so I can better understand. Because look, all interactions that I've had with you beforehand have been very short on Twitter or a couple of chats. You don't get to understand what is driving a person when that's happening. And it's, you know, just to hark back to what you said about eels, right? We want to get our eels back. I was in a political family, right? I was living in Wellington in the 90s. Dad was the president or vice president of the party at various times. And so I got to sit inside the smoke-filled rooms of Parliament and watch decisions get made. And people think that Parliament, you know, is in the debating chamber and that's where decisions are made. That's not where decisions are made. Decisions are made back in those days over ciggies or cigars and a scotch, sitting in a room with a bunch of people arguing a point out until you came to a solution. And I can remember sitting in Doug Kidd's office. He was the speaker at the time, so I was in the speaker's office. He was sitting there chain smoking. Number of other MPs and ministers and people were there. You know, Bill Birch was there. Doug Graham was there. They were all sitting there. Maurice Williamson was there. And they were talking about the Sea Lord deal. And Doug Kidd said, oh, that was a close run thing. And I said, why is that? And he says, well, fucking eels. He said, here we are talking about this multi-million-dollar Sea Lord deal that was going to put the ownership of Sea Lord invested in Maori so that they could train people, they could build businesses, it was an international business, so there was a whole lot of training opportunities, and it all just about came undone because somebody said, what about the eels? Now, Doug Kidd was a farmer, You know, he knew that eels are the canary in the mine, so to speak, right? If your land's not doing too well, the eels won't be doing particularly well. You look after the eels or look after the land so the eels are good, then everything's fine after that. And he said, but I was dealing with a whole bunch of, city slickers who didn't understand what he did, just thought they're slimy things. But eels was very important. He said that nearly undid the Sea Lord deal.
Well, like it almost undid my career, and I thought, bugger this university thing. I'm not gonna, because to me, eels growing up was going eating with my dad and getting growled at every 5 minutes for not holding the torch straight. We're going out at hold that bloody torch straight, man. And then he'd throw it up on the bank, and I'd miss it and slither back in again, and he'd get shitty. That's how eels, and that's how I grew up with it. Then I get to university, and my chief goes, I want you to do a master's degree on eels. And I went, oh, fucking eels. And then, because there was last year my grandfather was alive. Spiritual man. Yes, boy, if those eels are gone, so are we. It just shows, if we can't even slam our head in the water in there and last 5 minutes having a swim, let alone drink it, then everything else we're doing with our economy is wrong. And so I said, when you're 18, you're not listening to that, eh? I'm just thinking, how can I go out to the clubs and play in a band and all that sort of stuff? But the point that I think, and that's where the cigar thing came in with you and I, mate, is that I didn't know that then. I was a kid. And now, unless I get a chance this afternoon or whenever I can, when you give me all your fresh cigars, bro, I'll sit there for 2 hours and thoroughly think about what you and I talked about today.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, where does that sit? I think the other thing too that I want to put across to you and your audience today is that I've got a vision. And I can tell you where it's come from, and then to hand it over to you and say, with a scientific process, hash it out. Throw it back in my face. Tell me, stick it up my ass if you want. And that's the thing that I grew up with. King Tawhio, what he did at the time, he established the first bank in New Zealand to trade with Pākehā. He had a newspaper. He had 14 flour mills operating in Waikato, exporting overseas. We were not backwards. We were moving forward. At the time between the 1860s,
To grasp the opportunity of interaction with settlers and colonists, to grow understanding, to bootstrap Maori out of being a Stone Age society into participating in a modern society really quickly.
Yeah, like I'll go out today though. So back then he goes, oh, well, if Victoria could have a bank, I'll have a bank.
Well, that's where the Kingitanga movement came from.
I'll just do that.
Victoria can be a queen.
Yeah, oh, well, I'll have a king. Yeah, exactly. If they want to do like that, I come away. And so it was a counter, but there was a spiritual momentum that gathers when you do bring people together, and that's what had been built up. And Tawhio especially he's a very important figure in my thinking and in my life, because he wasn't scared to come out and be different to the rest of his relations.
Maybe he should be on a banknote.
Yeah, well, he was.
Mm.
So Te Pēkeo Aotearoa, he established in 1886. I talked to Don Bresh about this once and say, hey, bro, tell me about Te Pēkeo Aotearoa. He goes, oh, it's in your museum, bro. You were the Reserve Bank governor, weren't you? Oh, I don't really know that much about it, Lee. We'll find out then, bro. Because I hear a good interest rate. Because you brothers buggering around with the interest rate is what causes inflation. I'm sitting here with Don going like this, having coffee like this. But what I'm saying about that figure that I have in my mind, he stood up and said, nah, we're not going to be mediocre. In fact, and we're not going to complain to the Pākehās. We're going to take that and go, okay, Pākehās, you follow us. Come on, test it out, see what you think. So that idea, and he said, kare kau ana he whakakitenga, ka mate te iwi. Without vision, we dead. The people will perish. Someone has to say, hang on, let's go over here. Everyone else will say, oh, no, we're quite comfortable here, bro. Well, it's not working. Oh, no, we got used to it not working. But you're broke. Nothing's working. Oh, no. No, why? Hey, are you? And then the tall poppy syndrome.
You're like, oh, are you into university?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, are you at the think you're smart.
Yeah, shit, yeah, bro. When I was a kid, I never told I'd go home like this and, what are you doing, bro? Oh, I'm just living in Hamilton. I'm at university, and because I just didn't fit in. But what I was saying though is that there's some things if I was leading at their time that I would have done differently, and here's one of them. When we established the Kohanga Reo movement and the Kura Kaupapa movement to revitalise the Māori language, they came to Te Ariki Nui. Back then, any initiative in Māori, then they would come to her to say, what do you think? And the chiefs at the time, and one of our chiefs at the time, Henry Tufanga, who was the speaker, my grandfather was younger than him. But he was the speaker there when she first became the queen. And they said, what should we call it? And he said, Kohanga Reo. That means to just nurture the language, right? What I would have done differently to Uncle Henry now, I would have said, teach the reo, but teach them not to bullshit. Tell the truth. The first thing in the language is a term whakapono. Tell the truth. So Bob's even doctoral degree at Oxford was, in essence, bullshit in, bullshit out. If the whai kōrero and all the kōrero is lies, it just disseminates right throughout the community. So I had a vision of Te Reo Māori being the only language on earth that you can't bullshit through. And why that is, it'll just eat you inside. But what I'm finding now in this generation, in these last couple generations, they just don't know. There are some things, Cam, that I can say in Māori that I cannot say in English. And if I dare cross that barrier, because what we're talking about in whai kōrero is speaking to the dead too. It's a spiritual speech you're making. And if you're full of shit, and if you're just going to just carry on and perpetuate things, you may be oblivious to it, but your people will be hurt. And that's what tāwhia meant. Ka rea kau ana he whakakitenga ka mate te iwi. What's your vision? Is your vision for good? But if your vision is, Pākehā's a racist, if your vision is, we're oppressed, then that will melt, that will just seep its way into everything you do. Have good faith, not bad faith. That's what whakapono means. Have good faith in the future.
That was the idea behind the treaty settlements. I can remember debating this with Doug Graham, because not many people know, but when I first moved to Wellington, I lived with Doug Graham in Vogel House. And he'd get up early in the morning, and that was my first introduction to cigars.
Yeah.
Because he'd be having a cigar with his muesli. To bring us the guy, man. Hey, a breakfast cigar, man.
I remember the story, and was this in 95? I remember they were negotiating at a hupu in the dark.
Yes.
And you can see the butt of his, the thing of his cigarette, and they're walking around.
That would have been a cigar. He only smoked cigars as far as I.
Right, okay.
But he said the same thing, that we need to negotiate from a position of integrity. We need to resolve all of these issues so we can move past them. And we've gone a long way. I mean, there's only one iwi left that hasn't signed. And it's ironic it's Ngāpuhi. It's ironic because they were the first to start trading. They were the first to the interactions with the colonizers, with the settlers, with the British government. They're also the reason why the treaty was signed by so many other iwi around the country, was because of Ngāpuhi.
Well, it was all happening up there.
Yeah.
Up north, yeah.
Well, you had Hongi Hika just a few years before the treaty in the 1830s, marauding down the Bay of Plenty and
through our way.
Down through our way, taking thousands of slaves back up to Northland.
Yep.
And so, ironically, Ngāpuhi are pretty much the cause of the treaty, and now they're the last iwi standing.
Funny that I never thought of it that way.
And they're still fighting with each other.
Because I was there as a youngster at the time where all the good intentions were there from both sides.
Yes,
we're sitting there, just all these great ideas we can get on with this, but there was a reticence there with Te Ariki Nui, where it wasn't like, okay, we just sign this now so we can discover ourselves. It wasn't. This is not who we are. I want it out of the way. Now, our youngsters come through, economy, get the bills down, how we form good trade relationships, industry.
Educate our youth.
Yeah, exactly. It was all about education. But now, and this was the thought that I would how I would deliver the message differently if I was there now leading then would be about the lying thing, te reo Māori, whakapono, tell the truth. But also is that when I was encouraged to get into education, but looking back on it now, it should have been more specific. Because it was like, you have a bit of a sugar rush. Hey, we're going to have an education grant and everyone's going to get into it. So I was like, everybody comes through the door. Helen Clark gives student loans. So everyone's coming in, racking up student loans. So it was like just education. But what I would do differently now, from in hindsight, looking back, say, no, but specific education. Don't just go in there and just, I'm at uni now, so that's it. It's got to be targeted. And then it's got to be based on the scientific process, where I've seen as a former dean and head of school, sitting in there and I've had to break up faculty meetings and say, hey, no, none of this groupthink. I want to get some other opinions in here. You're sitting here on a tenured professorship, recycling all the same, and I could see where woke was born. It's born in the minds of these brainy bastards who sit in these faculty coffee lounges. And
Elon Musk calls it a mind virus.
a mind virus, yeah. They sit there and they've got there's no debate because they've got permanent tenureship and all you got to do is just keep publishing. And then you get these 18-year-old kids coming in 300 a time in a lecture theatre. Oh, well, I've got these minds to influence here. And I saw that happen. And so it's not as though as what I'm going to present to you here today has just come down in the last shower rain. It's come from decades now of saying that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. What I can say unequivocally, the intentions of the treaty settlements have not worked.
So
nothing's improved. Things have gone backwards. Let me make a point on that. Our marriage rates, our home ownership rates, our employment rates were higher before we signed. And so when I look at that, my relations would say, oh, no, it's because of the racist bias. I said, no. This data is clear. All these intentions we had, and I was right there. I gave my life to it. I committed my whole mind and everything to that vision. But I remember what Te Araki Nui said, ko tahi noi ho te atua. And now looking back on that, bring all the people together, because unless we're together, unless we can get along and talk like we're talking here today, all that money is just going to get pissed up the wall. The river's not going to be dirtier, cleaner, it's dirtier. And we're the biggest farmers in the country, Māori. We got the biggest dairy operations in the country. So and when I put it like that to you, Cam, and to the country, just I'm asking people to stop and think and look at what's actually happened. I wish it would be different, but it's not. The facts are we've gone backwards, and I want to present a program here to move us all forwards.
You keep referencing what the Maori Queen said to you, and the messages that she wanted to break from the past, break from the grievances, put it all behind and move ahead. That sounds like, I guess the best English term for that is self-determination. It sounds like
the Māori term for that is mana motuhake. And that's what if there was a neon sign around what she meant and what she said to me, mana motuhake means to stand up on your own feet. And her ancestor Kingitanga, because her knowledge wasn't just something she thought of, she was taught by her father who was the king and so forth and so forth. So that vision of mana motuhake was handed down. Most people would hear me say that term and go, oh, that's protests and hikois and give my land back. No, it's not. That's not what it means. Kingi Tāwhiao said his, what's called a tongikura, mana motuhake, which is like a proverb. And it's always rung in my ears my whole life. And he said, mākua noa hei hanga I tōku nei whare, which means, as for me, I shall build my own house. I'm not waiting for the government to build it for me.
See, my grandmother used to say something similar. It was a lot simpler, but it was to thine own self be true.
Yeah, and that's in essence what it is. He didn't say, I'm going to build all your houses for you because you're victims. He said, I'm going to build my own house, and guess what? The blueprint is open source. If you want to get off your own ass and build your own house, I'm going to set up an economy over here, but I'm not going to build it for you. As for me, I'm going to build my own house, And there's a lesson in there is that there is a sense of merit and independence, but that's how you get a collective purpose, is by having examples where you can follow, and then others can follow them and test them through the scientific process. But what he's basically saying is this: avoid groupthink. Avoid sitting in a group and going, "This is
They're
how."
all victims, bro.
Yeah, this is how you can tell groupthink. You're sitting there. I'm going to go and present this to the country here. I'll present this, right? And groupthink would look like this. Instead of looking at it and go, "I'm going to present the Constitution of New Zealand to you all. Have a look at it. Have a read. See what you think." Here's groupthink.
What's he on about?
No, looking around at the others. Wait for them to go first. Very few. Okay, pass it here then. Now I can write a better one than that. That's the groupthink is I'm scared to move. But what Tawhia was saying is, well, somebody has to. And if you fellas want me to be your king, I'm going to say, here, mākua no he hanga I tōku nei whare, now get off your own ass. Get up. And that's what Te Ariki Nui said to me when I handed my master's degree to her. We're standing there because she's lovely.
Thanks for that, Lee. Thanks for that, boy.
Yeah, exactly, bro. And there were heaps of us. There's
Now
12
get
of us.
on with it.
Yeah, exactly, bro. I was like, well, yeah. When I hooked her, I come up, right, I'm handing it over, got to have the photo, right? And she's just standing there, lovely lady, you know. She goes, righto, yeah, get your education and move forward in your life. And here's another thing she said: lead by example. I want, and when you're there, when you're around true leaders, they make you feel like you can do something.
But they also make you feel like you're the most important person there, not them.
Yeah. It was like, look, I'm going to be dead soon, Lee. Okay, I'm not going to last forever. And unless you can move this thing forward, unless you can move forward in your life. But the point she was making was that the example is that you've come up here, we've got all the cameras here, all the tribes here, looking at you over here, getting this master's degree or this qualification, standing here, right? And not once did she say, yeah, throw that Pākehā thing in the bin. No way. It was like, now you know that, now make it better and bring all the people together.
So you sound a lot like Brian Tamaki, right? And that's not a criticism, right? I like Brian Tamaki a lot. I think he's a rascal, but I think he believes in the same things that you do. He's just got a different mechanism for achieving those things. And I'll say the same thing to you that I said to him. I said, you sound like the wrong kind of Maori.
Oh, yeah, look, and I suppose, yeah, that's the thing, is that what I wanted
You'd
to
be called an Uncle Tom by many Maori out there, right?
No, look, I need to be called a kupapa and a traitor and I need all that. You know why? Because I look at you and I go, well, what the hell are you? What are you doing?
I'm just wondering when you get...
Show me your constitution, boy. It's like everybody can be a naysayer, right? But with what I'm putting forward through to here is that at the end of the day, what I'm putting forward here is a program to improve the country, but there'll be those who don't want it to improve, and that's them. Because if we have to improve, that means that means I'm not a victim anymore. Does that mean I've got to do something? I say, yeah. Just like my elders taught me to do something. Now, if you want to sit there and do nothing, then yeah, you're not going to like this. And that's I'm trying to get to the principles before the detail. The principle is, and I'm excited about it because you know what, Cam? Nothing's working. See, so it's not as if I've got any competition. Who else can present something and say, no, we can sort that out? Now, with what you're saying there about Brian and other faith leaders, yeah, because they're saying, like what Te Ariki Nui said, ko tahi noi ho te atua. There's just one God, bring them all together. So there's that unifying thing there. But what I've separated from me and Brian is I've got an actual program to present.
You didn't grow up too far apart either.
No, he's from Te Kopo. He's from down in Maniapoto as well. What I'm saying about this is I've heard enough about the whinging. I've heard enough about the problems, transgender this and anti-golf this and all this. I've heard all that. What's the program? What are we going to do next? And how are we going to, for instance, cut the cost of living? How are we going to do all that? What's your economic program? So at the base of the Constitution that I want to present to you is economic reform, but that's not new. That's exactly what Tawhia did. He said, look, we can talk about what we don't like about each other, but at the end of the day, we're going to have a feed today at some point. So look, as you make that reference there about Brian and others, there's a lot of people that you've spoken to. I'm saying, look, I'm not here to talk or litigate any further the fact that we're in the shit and,
Well, I think
and
the
that
whole-
nothing's worked. But I want to present a
I think
program.
the whole country is in the shit.
Yeah.
We've forgotten how to talk to each other. We've forgotten how to discuss. You mentioned earlier on, what I meant to, when you're on the pai,
Yeah.
that you listen to all points of view and then come to a consensus. There would be people at the Maori that would say something vociferously against whatever the idea was that they were discussing, and then you'd get people who'd stand up and support it, and then they'd come to a decision. We seem to have lost that. We talk past each other all the time. And I look at the antics, and it's the only way that I can describe it, of Te Pāti Maori, and I shake my head because I look at what Peter Sharples and Tariana Turia tried to achieve. And they had great mana. They didn't demand it. They didn't have it because they scribbled on their faces. They had it because they were wise. And that wisdom is still there, but sadly, under John Tamahiri's direction, we've almost gone back like 40 years where there's this constant grievance. Something's wrong and it's all you white fellas' problems. And frankly, most of New Zealand has had a guts full of it and they're sick of it. And they look at the people that are saying these things and saying, well, hang on, what about your shared whakapapa with you, like you with Irish ancestry or me with Scottish ancestry? We all we all came on different boats, right? Some were called waka and some were called sailing ships and some are called airplanes, but we all come from somewhere else in New Zealand. No one was here first. Not even Maori. I used to joke to Willie and JT on radio when I would go into the studio with them at Radio Live, and I said, you guys are just the first colonizers. And they'd laugh and joke. And now if you said that to them, they'd tick you off and tell you off, particularly Willie Jackson. And I'm sitting there thinking, how did this come about? We had a whole country that was looking at settlements and treaty settlements to move past all that. And it's like we've gone full circle and we're back fighting all the same battles again.
Yeah. And so even if I would say to you, well, we've gone nowhere in the last 30 years, it's worse than that. I agree with you. We've gone backwards. The Māori living standard prior to the first settlement was higher than it is now. For example, even further back, between 1945, so after World War II, and 1975, the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal, Māori two-parent households, home ownership, and employment rates were high, and it's in some areas higher than Pākehā. It was unheard of to be divorced. It was unheard of to be unemployed. And so those principles there, if you look at it, but what was sold there was, no, that was the time we were most depressed. So let's replace fathers with welfare. That'll work. And that's what I'm saying is that we've replaced what worked with what sounds good. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. But the chiefs at the time knew that. So for instance, if I go across the country right now, if I said, okay, Māoris, all you tribes, you can have your own bank. You can charge a 0% interest rate. Like, oh, we can't do that. That's a Pākehā idea. No, the first one was a Māori in 1886, to the point where we've even lost sight of the things that we've even achieved. And so I'm just tired of it. I had wonderful intentions too, as a young man. And I had great guidance, but there was that warning along the way. If we sign this, and that's what Te Ariki Nui was scared of, if we sign this, we're never going to move forward. We're always going to have some sort of bulwark or some sort of thing to slap other people down with. And it's an excuse for us to accept mediocrity and move forward. I didn't know that young. But what I'm saying to the country now, can you see the evidence? And so I'm saying no to just another political party or another venture. It's throw out the whole parliamentary structure and start all over again. a complete constitutional convention. Start all over again. I don't see anything that's even worth keeping. And I'm saying this from the standpoint where I wish I wouldn't say that. I couldn't say that. But it's so crystal clear that nothing's working. So the test really for me in communicating this with the country is to say, look, if you want to keep doing the same thing and keep getting nowhere, then just keep spinning around the edges, and then you get those ones like the names you mentioned here, where the Māori Party is completely thriving on that mediocrity.
Not only thriving on the mediocrity, they're thriving on conflict and
They are
creating conflict.
they're financially tied to the mediocrity. I mean, if people get off their own arse and own their own house, they don't need to be going to their whānau water provider. All those things disappear when the people themselves, starting with an individual man and their spouse and their children, when they stand up, what Tāwhia was saying, mākua nō hei hanga I tōku nei whare, now these collective groups, you don't have to go to your runanga to apply for a grant to establish a housing project. I put it in the Constitution.
There's a slight problem. Now, we haven't discussed in depth your plan, but you're ostensibly the leader of a party.
Yes, but no.
But no.
Yeah.
Because we have a system and you're not inside the system, and so you're trying to crash into the system.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, no, give me 51% of everybody registered to vote. Come over to unitenz.org. That's your vote of no confidence in Parliament, and abandon that whole parliamentary structure and the Crown, and start all over again.
But then you'd be part of the system, because if you did do that and you did end up with that, you would be in the system.
No, it's a new system. So no Parliament, no Crown, a new written constitution for New Zealand.
But how does that work?
Yeah, that's what I'd love to describe it to you.
That's why I asked you, how does that work? How can you have a system where we have elections and things like that?
Yep.
You're asking to participate in elections and to get a certain percentage, and then you're saying, well, thank you for that percentage. Now we're going to destroy the system.
No, but that would be so if I ended like that.
Right.
But I'm starting like this. I'm saying, look, we could get 500 paid registered voters to register like any other party, register a party, go through the front door, bugger around with a ballsed up system. Nothing's worked, and bugger around in there like what they all do. That's what they all do. I'm saying, nah, I think not. I think 1.8 million of you come over and you say, no, we want at least a new proposal to look at. And if we want that proposal, we replace the Parliament and we establish a new form of government based on a written constitution. So I've written it, and it's at unitenz.org. That's my punch for it.
Yeah.
But the major purpose behind this was that I wrote it because nothing else has worked. So all you got to do is say, no, mate, everything's fine. Stick your constitution. We're going to carry on with Parliament and the treaty and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just saying, well, here's another option.
See, I'm a constitutionalist as well, right? But I'm also a realist. And I look at our constitution as it stands in New Zealand, which is inherited largely from a collection of laws from the UK. And it works okay to a certain level, but now we're starting to experience judicial interference in constitutional matters. It doesn't matter that the Parliament passed a law saying 3 strikes and you're out. The judges don't agree with that, so they just ignore it. A written constitution has its merits, but it has its merits on the basis usually of conflict. And if you look at the US Constitution, it came out of their War of Independence against the United Kingdom, where they said no more kings, and they had a group of people, quite young age, most under 30, who were the draftees of the US Constitution, and came up with a pretty good document that was then signed, the Declaration of Independence. We've had the Constitution of the United States, and away they went. And there's been a few amendments to it and things like that, but it was formed out of the basis of conflict. And if you look at Fiji, for example, and why I raised Fiji is I was born there. I have a close position in my heart for Fiji because of where I was born. And they had a coup culture where they had several coups. They had conflict. You had conflict between Europeans and Fijians. You had conflict between Fijians and Itaukai Fijians and Indo-Fijians. And it culminated in Frank Bainimarama codifying, and I happen to know one of the drafters of that constitution. He's a Kiwi guy. They've got a written constitution now that says that all people born in Fiji are Fijians. There is a slight distinction in Itaukai and everybody else, but largely, if you're born in Fiji, you're a Fijian. I'd love to see a written constitution here in New Zealand, but the problem I see is who's going to write it? If we do have a constitution, written constitution, it will also abrogate the necessity for the Treaty of Waitangi and probably preclude or I foresee that it will also be the end of us being a constitutional monarchy and end up being a republic. And the problem I have with that is Helen Clark's still alive and so is Jim Bolger. And both of those people, hardcore Republicans, are the very worst people that we could end up having as a president, even if it was a titular type arrangement rather than an elected type arrangement. And so I see huge problems in trying to bring that forward to having a written constitution and changing our system of government, because you'll also get pushback from Maori, because they're going to say, well, we've got this special relationship with the Crown. There's been some revisions on that, on what that means. We're now into a fanciful, sort of fairyland belief that there's, equal partners in two different systems. How do we get to having what you're suggesting, a written constitution, without having upheaval or indeed a civil war?
Yeah, so that's like, for instance, and asking for 51%, I'm saying there's no hikoi, there'll be no public meetings because it'll be impossible. Imagine if I said to the district and city councils, would you mind facilitating see if you can suss out whether 51% of the registered voters of New Zealand would consider a new constitution, and they had a meeting, the mob would just barrel into the chambers. Even the idea of public discussion is almost impossible.
So I'm pretty sure you'd get shut down and be called divisive and racist.
Exactly. I already am, mate. You should see my TikTok.
And Uncle Tom.
Yeah. You see it. So you answer your question, who's going to write it? I've written it. Here it is here. It's found at unitenz.org. The written constitution of New Zealand. He asked me why. On the back of it, I've answered that question. So if you go and download the thing on the back, why do we need a written constitution? New Zealand does not have an existing single and complete written constitution that we can each hold in our own hands. Instead, we rely upon the subjective interpretation of separated constitutional documents and transitional arrangements through statutes enacted and amended by Parliament, Supreme Court opinions, letters patent, parliamentary rules, and unelected tribunals. The purpose of a Bill of Rights is not to give we the people rights and freedoms, but to limit controlled government. Our rights and freedoms pre-exist any government and should never be taken away. Bills of rights worldwide have failed, including the US. In that regard, we must therefore clearly define, confine, and refine our government to prevent further oppression and protect from suppression of our pre-existing rights and freedoms. New Zealand will be the first nation to enact a bill of limitations and controls on government, or blocks. That's Article 2 of this document.
Yeah.
The Constitution of New Zealand is not a living document, but an enduring law. We the people are the living power of this Constitution. We exercise democracy specifically through Article 1, Section 1, and that we each convince our fellow citizens in free and open debate, with Cam paying for the cigars, and pass laws democratically by the people for the people. In our democracy, the majority decision shall rule, pursuant to Article 1, Section 1, except for the specific exceptions to democracy contained in Article 2, Sections 1 to 9, in which no majority nor government can amend except via a 75% supermajority amendment. And lastly, I say in there, We believe in progress, but to progress democratically through our Constitution of New Zealand. So now when I answer that last question of yours, Lee, there's upheaval that's going to come. This is not to put slide on what you've told me today, Cam, about your stroke, but today I could die of a stroke. I don't care. I'm here for my children's future.
Yeah.
I don't care what I'm going to be called. I'm an ex-cop too, Cam. I didn't mention that. I've been called everything under the sun. I don't care what people say to me. Sticks and stones. Okay.
When did that cease to be relevant? Yeah, we hear about people that go, oh, I'm offended by that. Or,
Yeah.
oh, that's triggered me, or that's upset.
Yeah, exactly.
My mum used to say,
Exactly.
well, don't worry, he's a dick.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
It's precisely right, mate. So, and you answer your question, what's going to cause this is it's not my job to tell you what's going to happen. It's my job to present the Constitution of New Zealand and say, have a look at this. Because the other choices just keep doing what we're doing. And that's basically
The
it.
question I'd have for you then is, why have you not considered taking these ideas inside an existing party? Like, a lot of what you're saying there would resonate with ACT Party people, for instance, or New Zealand First Party people, or National Party people. I won't mention the parties of the left, like Labour or the Greens or Te Pāti Maori, because they've all got a vested interest in keeping division going, having poverty continue to exist in New Zealand, because their entire rationale and their party structure and their grift on the New Zealand taxpayer relies on those situations never improving. You're saying something different here. You're saying, I actually want to have an improvement. I want to have the things that the treaty settlements were supposed to realise for Maori and for all New Zealanders, that the treaty was signalling that we could all enjoy if we signed up to these things. Those are the things that the centre-right believes in.
Yeah, look,
The conservative.
I'm a former ACT Party member. I joined New Zealand First until I met Winston at a public meeting. I asked him, hey, bro, I stood up in Cambridge, you going to raise my parents' pension? And he took 5 minutes to say something I can't even remember. I wanted a yes or a no. So I've looked at these options, but they are thriving on the mediocrity and the lack of clarity, because there is no written constitution. You just vote for these personalities and hope, oh, Winston's my man, or Seymour, or Rawiri, or whoever. Eh?
Or worse, it's red or blue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I'm putting forward here about this, the reason that distinguishes this constitution from the one that we don't have is economic reform.
Right.
So
that's the key.
Yeah. The flagship of this Constitution of New Zealand is economic reform, and specifically the price level and inflation, the cost of living. And so I've got some different insights that none of the other parties carry. And so, for instance, you mentioned...
We'll get to economic reform in a second. No, I just want to focus on the politics of this. Right? Because we pretty much agree we need a written constitution, right? What I'm trying to work out is how you get there.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So you've said you want 51% of the people to vote for Unite NZ. That's a big goal. It's a massive goal, right? And again, I go back to to my shooting sports. In order to shoot small, you need to learn how to shoot big, right? And that's something we learn in shooting. Like, can you hit that target? And if you can hit that target, can you hit a smaller one, right? Can you hit a smaller one? Can you hit a small? It's all about hitting your target. So you've got a big target.
Yeah.
Right? But you need to, from my experience in politics, and I've been doing it all my life. Right. I can't remember a time when politics has not been involved.
Yeah, I'm not a politician, and I don't want to be one.
Good. That's what I like to hear, because people who are career like someone who's 20 who wants to be an MP, I want to slap them silly, right? They know nothing.
They need them growling at the par to get the hangi right. That's all they need in there.
Yeah, that's right. And again, a growling just to reinforce it. Right. That's not how I'd put the rocks in there, boy. Yeah. You think you're going to hit the rocks like that, boy? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an adult conversation, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two questions I always ask people, right, who have grand ideas. And it's not a slight saying grand ideas,
Understood.
right?
Not taken that way.
I mean, I said the same thing to the last election up in Northland. And if you can't answer these two questions, it's going to
Go nowhere.
go nowhere,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So in order for this to
Let
get
me hold it up again there, bro. Here's Cam's Constitution of New Zealand at unitednz.org.
right,
Hit me, bro. Hit me with your hardest question.
here it is, right? These are two questions. If you can't answer these, right, we've got a problem and we need to
Throw it at you, bro. Throw it at me.
First one is,
And I'll have an Opus 6.
yeah, how are you going to get an electorate? How are you going to win one electorate?
Yeah, none. So there's no electorates. So go to the website and review this. So the first thing that this constitution presents is a new structure of government.
Yes, but we've got an existing structure.
No,
What we do,
no.
you've got to play within that.
No, I don't. No, here's the plan, right? Here's the plan. This constitution is that good that those at least 51% will abandon the existing parliamentary structure and go to the website and just register at the website.
Yeah.
1.8 million of them will do that, right? That's the big goal. That's where we're going. Why would they do that? Because in this constitution, we have economic reform in here that will pay the bills. There's one question that this answers.
We'll get to the economic. We're dealing
No,
with
no.
politics here.
No. Before we get, no, actually, Count, I want to push you back on that.
Sure.
No, the politics will be driven by the cost of living. And that's going to guide the politics around this. People are going to make a decision, not on Lee, or not even a document. They're going to say, is this bloody thing going to pay my bills or what? And so then enter the decision. That's what
we've got 120 MPs and a massive system.
Yep.
Let's call it the swamp, because it is.
Yep.
Right? You can change governments, but what doesn't change is the bureaucracy, right? And so if you're wanting to push this and get it ahead...
Hang on, I've answered your first question?
No.
What was that first question and how I'm going to get it?
Yeah, you need to win an electorate seat.
No. People are going to come over here just in numbers.
Are they going to abandon the current system?
No. They're going to come over to here to the website, unitednz.org. They're going to register and join there. And we're going to wait for 1.8 million of them to do it. And they're going to go, why would they do that? Because they're going to go there and realize that's the only way to turn the economy around. Now, I'm speaking quickly because we may not have time to go into the whole economic reform.
Right, the podcast.
Right. It's awesome, bro. Yeah, awesome. It is the economic reform is the flagship. So
Sure.
So in essence, I'm saying I know they're going to come here because there's no way else for them to get the cost of living down.
Okay,
let's
say they do go to the website and do that, right? Let's say that.
Now you're talking, bro.
Yeah, let's say they do. I'll humor you.
Right. No, this is fact.
Let's say they do.
Yep.
You still got to get past MMP.
Oh, actually, let me start again with you, mate, because I think you
maybe
no. I don't think. I think just been around the normal government for too long, bro. Like you said, you were in there. You sat in that say you were used to thinking, "Oh, no, Parliament's everything, isn't it?" No, it's not. The people are. The people can step forward and say, yep, I clicked join. I think there's a couple of hundred that have already. They've clicked join. They're in there.
See, I say to politicians all the time, I've got 50,000 followers on.
Oh yeah.
On whatever social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And I say, what likes don't equal votes.
Yeah, but no. Those 50,000 followers haven't gone and filled in the same details that you would have to join a political party. Name, address, cell phone, date of birth, pay a donation. People say, mine's only $5. Well, what are you going to do with that money? Well, if I decide I want to go through Parliament, I need 500 of you to come and pay the $5. Otherwise, it's not like you say, kosher. It's not part of the system.
That's right.
Or I say, how about this? How about we get enough of you to come over here and look at this economic reform and say, that's the way the bills are going to get paid because the other way through Parliament doesn't. Now, why I chose 51, it's a clear majority. But if this works, like I'm saying it's going to, we could get 100.
And I'm just saying to you, do you know how hard that is?
Oh, mate, like I say,
That's not saying,
I said to you before,
right? Because
all you got to do is put something hard in my way, something difficult in my way. I've been bred and reared.
obstinate as I am.
No, not obstinate, mate. I'm not. I'm not pissing into the wind here.
No, I didn't say that.
No. What I'm saying is I'm not. Obstinate is probably a better word. But what I'm saying is that I've thoroughly thought through. I've got a better program. And if you just have a look at it, you'll realize how much the other one sucks even more. And so what I'm wanting to base this on, Cam, I'm basing this whole program here on what's in your own personal financial best interest.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying they will go that way more than anything else. But then, as you said, within the Constitution, are those what you would say that, yeah, socially the centre right, like even having a written law, not having woke judges, that's all written in here.
Yeah.
But then that'll be the bonus. But the decision must be made on paying the bills.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm banking on.
But it still comes down to basic maths, right? 5% of the population or voting population is about 150,000 votes, right? That's 5%. And you're not asking for votes, you're just asking for indications for 10 times that.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm saying,
so you're asking for
here's the pitch.
You're asking for nearly 1.2 million.
No, 1.8.
1.8.
I did a TikTok yesterday or the other day, said, hey, well, we got 250 just come in. That's gone down from 1,811,029 down to 1,810,000.
Yeah. So you know how many you've got to get.
That's the goal.
Right?
That's the goal. And then I say, all stay broke. Just stay broke then. Because as this goes on the rest of this year, and you guys wait for 2026 to roll around, this government is not going to get the cost of living under control. And then fellas like you will be sitting there contemplating the idea of having the Minister of Justice, Rawiri Waititi, sit here with you in 2027.
Oh, he won't ever sit with me because he won't want someone to challenge him.
Might do when he's a cabinet minister. But what I'm saying here is that the decision is actually binary. It's you either choose this or nothing changes. But what I'm basing this on, though, Cam, as I said about my background, have a look then.
So you
read it.
You making a pitch to do something different along the lines of what is happening in the United Kingdom now with the rise of the Reform Party, doing something different.
No, the Reform Party is still part of Parliament.
And they're getting a significant...
But I don't know of anybody else that's saying, no, we're not going to be another party and go in there. What I'm saying here is this, Cam. None of the parties work because of the structure of government and the actual parliamentary structure itself. For instance, I'll give you an example. In this Constitution of New Zealand, in Article 2, Section 2, it's got what I call the lying clause. Right? So if you think even me going for numbers is radical, listen to this. If I make a policy proposal during the campaign and then I don't deliver on it, that's 7 years. You're prosecuted for perjury. Now, within the parliamentary system, that's impossible.
That's 120 MPs in jail.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I told you I've got a new baby coming this month. I'm so adamant that this is better than everything else we've got that I'm willing to go away from my babies for 7 years.
Yeah.
And to present it to you, this is what I'm saying. Now, what I do want, though, from you and everybody else is to go in there and just show me where I'm wrong. Have a read. I've even got video inductions. I've got even frequently asked questions. It's all on the site. Go in there and say, no, look, Lee, you can't do that because of da-da-da-da-da.
I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying there's hurdles. It's like this, the neurosurgeon, 30 years experience in the hospital saying, you're never going to use your right arm again. I said to him, you never met me.
Exactly. So I'm saying is that I'm prepared to base it on, here's a proposal. What I'm putting forward here requires a complete elimination of everything and all the remnants of the system that created the mediocrity in the first place. It's a written constitution that replaces Article 3, Section 1. It's supreme law, so it's not an add-on to Parliament, right? And then to say, get in, have a read, yes or no. If it's yes, Here's what we can do. If it's no, then stay broke, because you're going to get broker. We are at a position now, a point here now, where I think every single New Zealander, even who voted for this government or voted for any other government, they know it's full of shit. I think they know.
Well,
I think they know nothing's working, no matter who we vote for.
Kiwis voted for change at the last election, and what did we get? Well, we just changed a ginger for a bald head.
Yeah. No slide on that, Prime Minister. We like cigars, though. Is that who else have you heard come on your show here? We're hearing across the country to say, hang on, I've had these lived experiences my whole life. We had all these good intentions. Who else has come on and said, maybe the whole thing's wrong? Maybe no party can do it. Maybe no savior politician, former CEO can do it. Maybe only the entire change in the structure of how we govern our country, to the point, do we even have a country? I contend with you, without this constitution, we don't even have a country.
So the Constitution provides a framework for how things operate.
Yeah.
Right? A guidance, a guideline, entrenches Bill of Rights. I mean, there's the most ridiculous situation we have in New Zealand right now is that our New Zealand Bill of Rights
Doesn't work, bro.
is just an act of parliament that just sits there and is studiously ignored by politicians.
Look, the US Bill of Rights doesn't work either. That didn't stop Fauci, did it? The
No.
Bill of Rights didn't stop Ardern. And that's why in Article 2, it's not called a Bill of Rights. I mentioned in that blurb, maybe the people can wind the tape back and listen again. I mentioned in there, a Bill of Rights is not a list of things that you're allowed to do. A Bill of Rights is a list of things that the government cannot touch.
Sure.
So it's a restriction.
Their rights, their inherent rights.
Yeah. So I'll give you the first one here. Okay, New Zealand. Here's Article 2, the Bill of Limitations and Controls in Government. I got this bloody microphone. So Section 1 is the test for Cam. Congress shall write no law restricting the freedom of speech. I'll stop there. That's right in number 1. The Congress of New Zealand shall write no law restricting the freedom of speech. Tell me, Cam, which term in there, in that sentence, do you think is the most important term regarding freedom of speech? Congress shall write no law restricting the freedom of speech.
Well, the operative word's restricting.
No. The operative word is the. Congress shall write no law restricting the freedom of speech, meaning that your freedom of speech pre-exists this government.
Now, in the United States, that's their first article of their Constitution.
Exactly.
Right? What's the second article of their Constitution?
Bang, bang.
Now, what's theirs?
That's the guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the right to keep and bear arms.
Keep and bear arms. Right. That's the Scalia, who I'm a fan of.
I've got bear arms now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Actually, look, one of the jurist minds that heavily influenced me in the writing of this Constitution was Antonin Scalia.
Yeah.
He's a constitutionalist, but also, more importantly, a textualist. The terms here, our second in the Bill of Limitations and Controls in Government here is to the lying clause. I think lying's more important than guns. Telling the truth's more important than guns.
There's a reason why Article 2 in the US Constitution says that you can bear arms and have a regulated militia, etc., right? You can't have freedom of speech without having to fight for it.
Yeah.
And defend it. And laws don't defend freedom of speech.
Yep.
Right? And the reason why they had that is they had to fight for their freedom of speech against the king.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we want to maintain that ability so that no tyrant can suppress us.
So Antonin Scalia, in writing the Heller opinion, said, the right of to bear arms is not just to jump in a militia or a National Guard. The right to bear arms is a personal thing.
Yeah.
To fight against tyrants who take control of the government.
Back down to that self-determination.
Yeah. But what I'm proposing here in this written constitution is that New Zealand have a go at it like this. Instead of going on a hikoi, instead of jumping up and down, read. Go to unitenz.org and read the bloody thing. It's a lot more peaceful. Even put your cigar in. Take your time, Cam. Read it. Go through. and then realize we can do it without an armed revolution. The last thing we want is a Castro type figure driving into Wellington on a bloody tank. No. What we want here is what we started with today, the kōrero way. The cigar, sit down, okay, let's test this bloody smart-ass Lee Taituha out. Let's go to his website, download this thing, and come back with me. I've even had I've got a series of frequently asked questions on there to save you the trouble, because I know you're going to ask the same thing. I get asked this all the time. Sorry, does this pay my bills or what?
Yeah.
Is this going to pay my bills?
Economic reform. I'm just dealing with the politics at the moment. We've got plenty of time, so
I'm excited, bro. I'm excited about it.
yeah, a good mate of mine trains politicians, right? Simon Lusk. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he loves training Maori politicians, right? He absolutely loves it for exactly the same reason that you're sitting across from me, right? You have learned as a young man, even younger than that, how to speak, how to elucidate your ideas, how to expand those ideas into a series of cogent arguments and defend those. And so he said it makes his job a lot easier because of the training that young Maori have had, particularly country Maori, who still have connections with the marae, still have connections with the elders, still have connections with having to speak on the marae. Their public speaking training is the best in the world, he says. And I hear that with you,
Look,
right?
I think that I'm flattered. Thank you very much. But here's a lesson I learned as a young man around the whai kōrero. So I mentioned about Bob's doctoral degree at Oxford. It was about whai kōrero. It's about bullshit in, bullshit out. Not only, yes, it's good to get a message out there. Everyone loves to be entertained. I'll even play the guitar for you too. I'll sing a song.
I bet you can play teen guitar.
Oh, shit, yeah, mate. You learn that when you're a kid. I play guitar boogie behind my head, bro, like that. What I'm saying about that, and it was a caution that was given to me as a young man by those same chiefs. Just know when you're out there, you got to tell the truth. So it's a spiritual barrier.
Why has that disappeared?
Yeah, look, it's basically just the idea that my identity is more important than me telling you the truth has just come about basically through the academy, mate, glorifying what they thought Māori meant. But what I was taught as a young man, and I'm getting to a point around oratory and speaking. This is not spoken. This is written.
Yeah.
And
good ideas, right? And you're explaining those ideas in a platform that you can actually expand those ideas, because I will bet you $1 to a knob of goat poo that you won't get more than 15 minutes in total during an election campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Other thing too, about even more so than that, I want to get back.
How are you going to get around that?
I'll ask you first question about the oratory. I need to get to the nub about what my chiefs taught me. Was that this? Yeah, but read and write, boy. Go to uni and write. So when I was a youngster going through the treaty settlement, I was there learning about Tom Sowell, Antonin Scalia. He'd only been on the Supreme Court a few years. Read these documents and just know that whatever's got to come out of it has got to be written. And that's what my grandfather and my dad taught me as a young man too. They didn't have that. Yeah, we can whai kōrero. Man, I could talk to you like, sit here, especially you're going to shout the cigars, bro. I'll talk to you all day. But the nub about this that's different, that people have not seen from Māoridom, and I don't have seen from any of the political parties, none of them have written a constitution. No, none of them have sat down, what I mean, textualism, and saying, look, I could come on a podcast here, I could come on your show and try and plead to the people, but at the end of the day, mākua no he hanga I tōku nei whare. They've got to go on the site themselves, they've got to read it, and they've got to decide themselves.
It's that self-determination again. You're relying on people to make a choice.
Yes, yeah. And so it's incumbent on me then to present through here and chatting with you today about my background too, is to say this has not just come down in the last shower of rain. I've seen what hasn't worked.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to understand your thought process. Yeah, it's taken on how you got there, because you can't expect a 20-year-old to come up with these ideas. right? The experiential learning has contributed to these ideas. And so now you're at the point where we've got the ideas, we've codified the ideas. Now we've got to spread those ideas around.
Yeah, and moreover, like you say, the long form interview here enables me to do it. I'm getting used to it too. And you see it in the cadence of my kōrero, it's fast because what other platform have we had to be able to really dig deep into this sort of thing? And so I'm hoping that the people would also too, through our kōrero today, Cam, is more so feel it too. And say, well, this guy thinks he's right. I'm going to get in there and show him he's wrong. Great. That's all I'm after, is to present it. But what I'm saying too, even the idea of it being written has come from what I learnt too, is that's where it's going to fall over. That's where what we've found is that whai kōrero is great, but there's so much variation, so much room to deceive in a flash elaborate thing like a big hikoi or the tractors coming up the bloody motorway, song and dance and all that. And I'm saying, yeah, all that cool. And it's great to be here with you, Cam. But at the end of the day, you've got to read it. And you'll go through there and ask me. Just ask me the hardest questions you can think of, and I'll answer them. And that's what we've not had. And the parliamentary system does not work like that. Why? Because it's all about what you can sell. It's all about what you can say, and then people just go, oh, well, and then we do this. Like I mentioned to some of our recent people who've joined is, yeah, we never voted last time, eh? Even if you voted for this government, no, you didn't. You just voted against the other one. And that's what I'm finding. People have just gotten to the point where they're saying, I want something to vote for, not vote against. And so within the Constitution here too, yes, it's very similar to the US one, but no, it's not. It has a bill of limitations and controls in government, but also the structure means that you don't need political parties at all. So you don't have a leader of a party who's got to toe a caucus line. Don't go out there and say that, Chris, because we won't back you and we'll roll you.
Yeah, it's what Simon O'Connor said on this podcast just 2 episodes ago, right? He said the same thing, is you can't go against what the party line is. Right?
I haven't written to abolish parties, but it doesn't require them. So the president can stand as an independent. Congress members can stand as independently. I'm not saying no to parties. I'm saying no to groupthink.
Yeah.
I'm saying yes to independent thinking, and then they present their programs. This does not outline any particular policies. It just says this is what the government can't, this is the structure, this is what it can't do, and it's supreme, meaning it's not an appendage to anything else. Now, have a look at that and just say, nah, my view is if you don't even look at it, you're never going to know anyway. But now more so than that, I believe this is the only way forward.
You've said persistently throughout this discussion to have a look at it and ask yourself the question, is this going to make my life better, or is this going to pay the bills? So the key area for this then is economic reform.
Yeah.
Now you've got a background in economics. Your thesis was around the economics of eels.
Yeah.
Right?
And where the Japanese people will buy them off us.
Yeah, I think that's right. So tell us about those, your ideas around economic reform.
Right.
Right. As they, people might start thinking, okay, this guy's batshit crazy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. If you don't think I'm batshit crazy, there's something wrong with you. You know why? Because I'm presenting something you haven't seen before. So it's always going to look weird. The economics.
I mean, people think that Karl Marx has the economics answer to everything, and every time that Marxism's been tried around the world, it's failed. And the socialists and Marxists always say, "Oh, that's because they didn't do it right."
Oh, look, I'd love for someone to come on the site, have a look at it, and go, get on TikTok or wherever, or put comments on the podcast and go, "Oh, look, I've looked at that dickhead's constitution. It's wrong because of this, and this." I would love that. I would just that's the goal, is to say, we'll just stop and think. But the economic reform, that's the pin. Now, I learned your typical neoclassical Austrian economics as a youngster.
Supply and demand.
Yep. So Mises, Hayek, Friedman, Milton. I'm a huge Tom Sowell fan, right? I learnt that right through high school. I loved it. Went to uni. I even taught accounting. It's all wrong.
Accounting is wrong. It's the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
The what's taught at university here, and not just New Zealand, it's all around the world. And I want to tie it back to your mate Rob Muldoon. There's something that happened in 1985 that changed the whole structure of our economics, but we didn't catch on to it. The neoclassical Friedman, like the Reagan-esque type Thatcher economic modeling is perfect if you're on a fixed currency. But if you're on a floating currency,
By Roger Douglas did.
it doesn't apply, yeah. So in 85 we floated it, then Roger Douglas unfloated it. Let me tell you why. How? Muldoon floated the currency, so we were fixed to the US dollar and a few others as well. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71, and the rest of the world pretty much followed. So that meant that the US dollar was a floating currency. Then we followed as well. Well, what happened in 89 when Roger Douglas wrote the Public Finance Act, which is now the Public Finance Amendment Act 2020, we amended it, what I'm saying correctly, for a virus. I'm saying let's amend it correctly for humans. So what happened is that we floated the currency, which meant that the government is the price setter. So there's no stock of gold that we've got to fix.
There's nothing to back it up.
That's exactly. So, and that's really how Muldoon was able to do the think big stuff. You know, there's a lot of employment schemes.
There's a lot of smug greenies out there who hated Muldoon, but now driving around with him. Of course, powers by the things he did.
They used to call him Biggie Muldoon. He's going to take our dole away from us. Yeah, that's what a lot of my relations were saying, and I thought that too growing up. But there's a key thing that occurred, and this is the linchpin of my whole economic program. Is that if we were still on a fixed currency, the Public Finance Act would make sense in 89. But because we switched from a fixed to a floating currency, now the government is the price setter. So now the government, through its agents, the Reserve Bank and the banks, is the issuer of the currency, but it's not backed on anything.
Yeah, they just print more, which is what Jacinda are doing with gay abandon.
Exactly. I can tell you more about what banks do, and show you what they do. But
I used to work in a bank, so
that's a good. Ask me some hard questions. So that's the key here. What I'm saying is that if we were still on a fixed currency, we would be forced to be based. Say if it was on gold standard or fixed to any other currencies, we would be limited on what we can do. So the government is just another player in the economy in that sense. It has to have gold and to be able to issue dollars, because on a gold standard, if you issue too many dollars, the people can come to the bank and pick up their gold, and now you're bankrupt. So we came off that type fixed arrangement, and I learnt that too as a youngster in economics. I learnt about basically the typical economics we learned, neoclassical economics, is based on a fixed currency. But here's what happened. When we floated the currency, then Roger Douglas comes along and writes the Public Finance Act and refixes it by saying, oh no, the government can't spend until we see tax receipts first. Right? So when you're on a fixed currency, that's so. But when you're on a floating currency, if the government doesn't spend first, you can't pay your taxes. So the government is the source of the currency of the only thing that we should
usually a massive state.
Yeah, no. I'll get to the politics of it in a minute. I'm talking about operations here. Just how a floating currency operates. Now, that's the insight here, is to say, before we get to policy and what we should be spending on or all that sort of stuff, is to say, New Zealand, you do not realize, the majority of Kiwis do not realize that we are not on a fixed currency, that the existing system is a floating currency. In this constitution, I'm proposing we stay there, but we operate it correctly. For instance, if the government issues too many dollars, everyone goes, oh, Zimbabwe, hyperinflation. And that's correct. But if the government issues New Zealand dollars for the creation of new goods and services, and that's the key, they must be new.
There has to be value.
Yeah, there has to be new goods and services, and more than that too, Cam, they have to be purchased.
There's no use making goods that no one wants.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like having, the government's going to spend $10 million and we're going to reintroduce a buggy whip industry, because when we had buggy whips in our economy, it was going gangbusters and we were exporting. So the theory is that we need to have more buggy whips.
right? So
But there's no buyers of buggy whips.
right. So exactly. So here's the key then. If I can convince you of this 3-step process here that's based on a floating currency, that's the whole constitution.
Well,
That's it.
the whole idea behind the currency is it is a holder of value.
Yeah. So
Right.
so here's where that value comes from. Now, most would think, oh, well, the currency is valuable because I can buy stuff with it. No. The currency is valuable for this reason. It is the only thing accepted in payment of your taxes. Okay, so the New Zealand dollar is the only accepted tax credit. So here's the sequence. Here's how it works. First, the government sets a tax liability. There's no tax payments yet. The government sets a tax liability, whatever that may be, and different parties and different groups would have different tax policies.
And different layers and different levels.
Yep, whatever.
But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a liability that
We can get into my
government.
we can get into my tax program in a minute, but the point I'm trying to make at the beginning is the start of the sequence is under a floating currency, not a fixed currency. On their existing currency, the government sets a tax liability that's payable only in New Zealand dollars, but more importantly, payable only in the thing that the government can regulate. Okay, so the government, through its agents, the banks, through the Reserve Bank is the supervisor and regulator of all of our banks. So first, the government sets a tax liability. That's step one. Now we're all unemployed. Why? Because we need to go and earn the thing to pay the tax with. So we do. We form a podcast. We build a business. We go and get a job. Okay, so the purpose of the tax liability
We
is...
add value through our labour.
That's right. So, but more pragmatically, the purpose of the tax liability being set then is now we become creators of goods and services. So now we go out and we do whatever we legally, by the way, everybody, legally.
And some people, their creation of goods and services is lackluster.
Yep.
And they get paid accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. We can get to that point in a minute. So
just 3/5 of 5/8 of fuck all.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So we don't want boondoggles and bullshit things that no one wants. Exactly. But back to the operations here. I'll get to policy in a minute. The operation is the government sets the tax liability first, payable only in the thing that the government can regulate and that only the government can issue. So if all New Zealand dollars must be issued by a regulated and supervised bank, and so there's about 26 of them here in New Zealand, the government sets the tax liability payable in New Zealand dollars only. Then we go and earn the New Zealand dollars to go from being unemployed to being employed, own a podcast, run a business, go to work. So now the tax liability had created unemployment. Now the government must spend first to enable us to earn those dollars to do the last step, which is the tax payment. So the tax payment's the last step, but most people think, the tax payment's the first step. It's not. The first step is the tax liability.
Yeah.
So we think, well, hang on. This government can't do anything unless I pay it. Wrong. The sequence does not start with tax payments. It starts with a tax liability, and then the government, through its agents, the banks, issues the tax credit or the New Zealand dollars, and then we make the tax payment. So this is literally what
They
happened.
also add in there an enforcement action that if you don't pay us your tax liability, we will use the powers of the state to force you to pay.
Exactly, and you're speaking to the conservative in me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go back to the sequence thing. The tax liability must be coercive, because if we just go, oh look, I feel like going to work today, or I might get up and go to work, or might start something. You can't run a modern economy like that. You need a coercive tax liability to drive the type of economic activity, aggregate demand, that we need to keep a real life economy going, not like barter or something like that. So the tax liability is mandatory and coercive for the reason that we need you to go and earn the stuff to pay it, and don't bugger around. Okay? But you can set tax. I'll get to the tax policy in a minute, but I'm just trying to get the sequence right.
Yeah.
That's the main insight of the Constitution here, is that I'm saying that we've had monetary operations that works, a floating currency, but the legislation's been written backwards to how our operations works, to how so here's how it would work. The government sets a tax liability. Now we're unemployed. Now we've got to go and get a job or do whatever we need to do to earn that tax credit. The government spends first, issues the currency first, then we earn it, then the taxes are paid. This is what happens when you pay your tax. Literally. You go into your account, say Cam's got $1,000 tax to pay today. You go into your account, you type 1000, enter. It does not go into a pot in government with other tax payments. Your accountant IID goes to zero. There's no pot of money sitting anywhere. It's just digits on screens. But most Kiwis don't know that. So for instance, when you go, what do banks do? I always get asked, okay, Lee, if these banks are so important in it, what's to stop the government from just issuing wheelbarrow full, like everybody says, Lee, printing money, what the hell's that? We're not printing anything. When was the last time you used cash? These are just digits on screen, so stop saying printing anything. But if the government's policy is to just issue dollars with no new goods and services being created, you're going to cause inflation. But if the policy is to issue New Zealand dollars only for the creation of new goods and services that are in demand, that's actually non-inflationary and it raises living standards. That's my key insight.
Yeah.
That's the difference between me and all those others.
Wouldn't it be better just to remove government altogether from being the piggy in the middle?
Yeah, look, but if you don't have...
Because governments hamper business, they don't encourage business.
If you want anarchy, if you just want no government at all, you could maybe convince me to go and fix the potholes in your street. Maybe, if you give me a cigar. Okay, but you can't run a modern economy without a coercive tax liability, not payments. The tax liability is what focuses us. It's how we go from mowing our lawn with scissors to a lawnmower. It's how we develop an economy, create new technology.
Well, actually, it's going from mowing your lawn with scissors to hiring someone to mow your lawn because your labor is worth more than spending 3 hours mowing the lawn.
Yeah. So back to the sequence again. If the government sets a tax liability that's too high, then the result is unemployment. Because remember, the tax liability creates unemployment. So if it's too high, how you know it's too high? Unemployment. And so the tax liability can be set and adjusted.
Yeah.
And so that's my point here. That's why I'm not in any other party or any other program, because none of them understand that. And none of them have amended the Public Finance Act, except Jacinda Ardern did it, but not for humans, for a virus. Okay? So what I'm saying is that the Public Finance Act, the legislation doesn't line up with the operations. How I describe it is, imagine if you learnt to drive like I did on a column change 3-speed Kingswood.
Yep.
A manual, but then, and you're used to driving with a manual, here's the gear stick and the clutch.
Yep.
Then you trade that car in for an automatic, right? But you're sitting there going, where's the clutch? There is no clutch on a floating currency, bro.
Yeah.
And so our mentality is manual or gold standard, but we have an operation that's floating. And so my sort of the palliative that I can offer to the people watching is that this prick's just going to print all this bloody money and cause hyperinflation. We're going to end up like Zimbabwe. So no, only an idiot would do that. So my policy is the creation of dollars, but tied to the creation of new goods and services only. And I also use this term free money. People don't believe that there's such a thing as free money. Yes, there is. Let me tell you where it comes from. When the government pays interest on government bonds, that's an interest income channel to people who own government bonds. That's money for doing nothing. I call it a universal basic income for people who've already got dollars. So if you think at the moment that the government is not issuing out free money, it already is. So why do we issue government bonds? Or another term for them are treasury securities. Why do we even do that? Back to my point. We think we're still on a fixed currency. Because when we're on the gold standard, we had to issue bonds to keep people away from the gold. But we kept that mentality and we still issue government bonds. They are not necessary.
But they're also not worth what they are.
But they're not even necessary operationally.
Yeah.
The government doesn't need to issue bonds. This is how it works. The government today could ring up all the banks, which are called, we call them primary counterparties in New Zealand. The big banks, there's about 6 of them. And they call them up, right, we're going to have an auction this afternoon. We want you guys to come in and buy $60 billion worth of government bonds because we want to pay for COVID subsidies, something like that, right? So they ring them up. These banks get on the call. Okay, everybody bid for the government bonds, and they will have an auction. It's a government bond auction.
And they figure into that the inflationary cause of dumping $600 million in
I want to get to that.
economy,
Hold that thought. I want to
and
get
therefore bid accordingly.
Yeah, I want to get to that. Hold that thought. I want to talk about dumping dollars into the economy. People think that the government dumps dollars into the economy through pensions and housing projects and hospitals. No, the government dumps free money into the economy every time it raises the interest rate. But people say, well, hang on, the Reserve Bank raises the interest rate. It's a government agency. The Reserve Bank governor is appointed by the Minister of Finance. The Reserve Bank is operating under the Public Finance Act and the Reserve Bank Act.
So they issue treasury bills and they say, we think that the people out there in the rest of the world will pay 8% for those.
Okay, so I want to describe it as a musical chairs that's irrelevant, is this. So you got these banks on there bidding for government bonds. Let's say Westpac wins. Announcing Westpac's just won the bond auction, right? You know what Westpac does? Goes to the Reserve Bank to get an overnight loan
To pay it for them.
Yeah. So why did it go to why did Westpac, it's called repos. Why did they go to the Reserve Bank for an overnight loan? Why didn't the government just issue it? And that's my point. The whole sale of government bonds is an anachronism from the gold standard. It's not even necessary. And what you get are these banks charging interest, sitting in there as middlemen, right? And ask yourself, which prime ministers you know own government bonds?
Oh, I can tell you, none.
How do you know?
Well, because they don't.
One of them used to be a bond trader.
I know.
You see what I'm saying here? Is that whole system is built not on, there's nothing, I'm not saying these guys are criminals. I'm saying our monetary system is floating. The sale of government bonds or treasury securities is irrelevant.
It's all smoke and mirrors to most people, right? At the end of the day, they want their employer to pay them their wages. They want the employer to have taken the tax out of that so they don't have to think about it. That's how PAYE came about. And what I've got left, I can go and spend on things.
You know why I just took the last 15 minutes to describe to you why the payment of treasury securities and government bonds is irrelevant?
Tell me why.
Because none of those in power know that. I'm the only one. They don't even know. That's why they keep doing it. And if you ask the Reserve Bank governor, he'll say, oh, I've got to because it's the legislation. If I don't, I'll get prosecuted. Yeah, the legislation's wrong.
No one in government ever gets prosecuted. I mean, there's no penalty. We had Ruth Richardson come in and pass the Fiscal Responsibility Act so that they would never again be presented with a set of books before the election that didn't tell the true position of New Zealand. Well, Michael Cullen left New Zealand in a poor position, not prosecuted. Bill English left New Zealand in a poor position, not prosecuted. Grant Robertson robbed us blind through inflation, not prosecuted.
Yep.
All of them arguably breached the Fiscal Responsibility Act. But you know what's not in the Fiscal Responsibility Act? Penalties.
Yeah.
And all too often, you have governments pass laws that supposedly apply to them, and they never get prosecuted. It's like a police officer who goes into the police computer system, uses the system with gay abandon, searches 1,700 different people, and the police turn around and go, well, he shouldn't have done that, but we're not going to prosecute him. If anybody else did that, if anybody else used a computer system inappropriately, they'd be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But if you're in government, or if you're in the police, or if you're in positions of power, you get a situation where the law actually doesn't apply to you. And that's when you get...
You've taken me back on the lying clause of the Constitution. But before I join with you on that, I'll tie it to the lying clause. Article 2 Section 2 says if I say something to you and it's not true, I can be prosecuted. And the penalty is 7 years too. It's not just a fine. Okay,
Well,
so
we already have laws like that, Lee.
it's perjury.
It's perjury. I mean, I was in court with Colin Craig. He perjured himself, was caught out, as a full flushing. He just lied. The judge even mentioned it in his judgment that he lied. My lawyer, Brian Henry, caught him out doing it, and he didn't get prosecuted for perjury.
Yeah. Well, under this constitution, it's not just even when you're even in office. It's in your campaign. Because that's where all the lying happens.
Well, that's when they promise the earth and deliver nothing, and you go,
Yeah.
oh well, my coalition partners said no.
You know what some of the people who've joined United Z said about that? Article 2, Section 2? Well, no one's going to run then. No. Not everybody's a bloody liar. So...
If you're a politician, yes, you are a liar.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. No way do I want to be... Yeah, exactly.
Jacinda Ardern said,
I couldn't imagine one politician comfortable with this. Ready? Article 2, Section 2. All government officials and candidates for public office are subject to prosecution and punishment of 7 years imprisonment for perjury or lying to we the people. Can you imagine anybody in there who'd want this? That's why I'm saying we've got to get rid of it, mate, because I'm not going to wait for them to agree with me.
Yeah.
But back on my point about government bonds, I want to talk about the cost of living. The cheese at the supermarket's $20 because of the sale of government bonds, not because of government paying pensions. Okay, so the interest that government pays on government bonds is a back channel investment into the economy that nobody sees. And not one PhD at the Reserve Bank has published a paper that describes it, but I have. At unitedz.org, I've got a paper called The Framework for the Analysis of the Price Level and Inflation, and I describe exactly what I've just described. Not one paper from the Reserve Bank's ever said it. So the inflation that we're suffering from is because of the system that's in place here now, but the remedy is not cutting government spending. The remedy is ending the payment of interest on government bonds. See, when you pay 1% of 60 billion on one day to bond owners, they take that to the bank to get a loan to go to a housing auction in Auckland and cause your houses in Auckland's price to go up. So when the Reserve Bank raises the interest rate, it raises prices. People think, oh no, when it raises the interest rate, it lowers prices. No, it doesn't, because you're raising interest on the government bonds. But people don't even know these bloody things exist. You do a poll, mate, and ask your audience, do all of you know what Treasury securities are? Yeah. And they go, oh, what's that got to do with the price of cheese? And I'm saying every bloody thing.
These are all bold ideas.
Right. That's not an idea. I'm just describing to you how it works now.
Sure.
That's not a policy, it's operations. That's what a government bond is. It's a savings account that you can earn interest on. And so, but only to people who can afford to own a government bond. What I'm saying, the sale of them in the first place is irrelevant on a fixed currency.
But how do we make this reality? Like, how do you make this realistic and achievable for people? And it isn't just going to a website and signing up and getting, 1.8 million people to do that. That's not going to get you there.
Yeah. Well, firstly, congratulations for getting on Cam's podcast. That's the first thing, information. They'd be hearing this. Most people that I talk to switch off as soon as I mention Treasury securities. Watch it again. Push rewind. Watch Cam's podcast again and again and again. Go onto my website. Send me an email and show me where I'm wrong. So that you're
inviting debate. You're inviting people to test. You're doing the ultimate scientific method.
I want you to show me where I'm wrong.
Where you're wrong.
Yeah, because if I'm wrong, I'll shut up. But if I'm right...
No, you won't. You won't shut up. What you'll do is...
No,
adjust.
No, what I mean by shutting up is saying, if you can prove I'm wrong,
you'll adjust.
Then I'm wrong. Okay? But if you can't, then read more. Read the next point, and read the next point, and the next point. So the economic insight, I want to cut to the chase around the cost of living. That bloody cheese in that chiller at the supermarket is $20 because of the interest that the government pays on government bonds, not paying old people's pensions. So you got tight asses like David and the ACT Party going, these are Austrian economics guys, they're libertarians, they say, oh, we're going to pull our boots. They believe the government is a player in the economy like us. The government is not a business or a household. So you, me, everybody else, we have to earn an income, right? The government is the income. The government is the source of the dollars. But Austrian economics, ACT, New Zealand First, National, all the rest of them, they think the people have to pay taxes first so they can officiate their government programs. It's completely backwards. Now, that should resonate to your audience by saying, oh, bullshit, that can't be right. You mean to tell me this guy's right and we're all wrong? I'm saying, yeah. And you know how I know you're wrong? Your economy sucks. So stay there, stay broke.
But is there any economy in the world that is doing what you say?
No, there's no economy in the world that has a 0% interest rate legislatively. What I'm saying here is that a permanent 0% interest rate is what's required in order to prevent this payment of interest on government bonds. But also too, on the counter side to that, here's your plumber and your carpenter, your working class people, where interest is a cost to them. So now they can have 0% finance to do something specific, to create new goods and services, not just go on a holiday. Okay, so let me explain to you what banks do. Banks do not take deposits. Banks are in the business of purchasing securities. So we believe, and this is another thing that's backwards New Zealand, we believe, hang on, we go to the bank, we give it money, right? Make a deposit.
And they pay us 2% interest.
Yes, they pay us 2% interest.
And lend it to other people at 6% interest.
Yeah, that's right. So we believe, that's what we think banks do, because they used to do that on a fixed currency. So a bank, that's where the term bank comes from. To bank, like a river bank, to put aside. So the idea of a bank is it's sitting there with a safe with money in it. Okay. So under a fixed currency, it would work. We would go to the bank, we would deposit money, it would hold that money, and then lend it out to other people for profit, for interest. That's not what they do now. So banks don't take deposits. Let me explain to you what they actually do. Here's the Constitution of New Zealand, but let's pretend it's a loan agreement. Okay, so you're the bank. I come into the bank, so I like $100,000 loan. And great, so what's your security? Well, I've got a job, I've got some other assets, your financial security, collateral, or what we call, these are financial assets, yep. But I want to use the term for you, security. So you have security. The bank looks at your security, says, yep, that's worth $100,000. Okay, so now you offer me a bank loan, the loan agreement, the promissory note, you sign it, I sign it, then it goes to a data entry person, they go and type 100,000 into my account. No deposit. There were no dollars coming from China. No one from inside the bank or outside the bank deposited anything. I wanted to say that at the moment you went, because that's what you just did. The bank, you didn't deposit anything. The bank purchased your security. That's what banks do. Banks are the creators of the money supply, regulated by the Reserve Bank, which is regulated by the government. So the fractional reserve banking doesn't exist.
What people most know is that they colloquially call that a mortgage.
Yeah, loan. Yeah.
But a mortgage is the security that secures a loan.
Yeah.
But if you understand the root word of mortgage, which is mortier, which is Old French.
Till you're dead, man.
Till you're dead.
Yeah.
They own you till you're dead.
Right.
That's what a mortgage is.
Yeah.
Once you understand that concept, that a mortgage is not a loan, a mortgage secures the loan.
What I just described to you, the operations of how a bank loan works, there is that the bank now has purchased your security off. They own it.
That's right.
Right. And that's what that mortgage means. But it's the same for a credit card and anything else. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I bet 99.9% of your viewers would say, no. I deposit the money in the bank and then they share it out. Well, let's go back through that system again. You filled out the
But we also know that's not true, right? We know that's not true because every bank in New Zealand, the entire New Zealand economy is running as a deficit. So we know that's not true, that we deposit money. Some people deposit money into the bank,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not enough of them.
No, but that deposit came from another bank issuing those dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make it clear. Banks do not take deposits. Banks are in a totally different business. Under a floating currency, banks are in the business of purchasing securities. And the proof of the purchase is the digits typed into your account. But however, there's something that mixes people up when they look into their account. On one side of the ledger, the bank has assets, and the other side is liabilities. Right. When the promissory note is signed and the bank types the digits into your account, it's entered into its records as a customer deposit, but you didn't deposit anything.
No.
It's actually an account payable. And so now the point I'm trying to make about that, Cam, to everybody watching is that I bet you didn't bloody know that. Maybe there's some other bloody things in here that you didn't know.
I work for a bank, so I didn't know that.
Not you. I mean, I'm saying about you. So you're clear on what monetary operations is, but the legislation is not based upon that.
You now have a liability to the bank,
yeah,
which now has an asset that it created out of nothing.
Yeah, and the proof of that purchase are those digits that you can go and pay away via.
The proof of that is the mortgage document or the loan agreement.
Yeah, but it was the loan that created the deposit. So the loan agreement enabled the bank.
It was a deposit, right? It was a deposit in the asset side of the bank's ledger.
That's right. So the fact that they own your stuff and they can turn up and repo it off you if you don't pay the loan VAT.
You don't meet the criteria. Yeah. Yep.
So let's get to policy. What's my policy? Permanent 0% interest rate. We don't need these bloody banks. They're not even necessary. The government is the regulator of the banks, and the banks create the money supply. People believe these banks are independent. We need them there. They're not independent at all. These banks are regulated. The Reserve Bank could walk into Westpac today and turn the lights off.
Yeah. They have a banking license which the government issues.
Yeah. So I'm in the Constitution here in Article 2, Section 8. Article 2, Section 8. It talks about that now this will become constitutional. And I'm saying to the punters out there, I'm basing that on the operations, not what I'd like it to be, on what it actually is here now. There is no requirement to have middlemen banks charging interest on something that the government can do.
So you'll have a lot of people who will say, yeah, bloody banks, all they do is take, we'll get rid of the banks.
Yeah. So then the question is, well, the banks themselves are profit driven. The creation of New Zealand dollars to purchase New Zealand goods and services, does not require a profit incentive at all.
What you're really saying is, in a lot of words, is that let's nationalize the economy.
It already is, because the Reserve Bank is there through the Reserve Bank Act. When people, and that's the myth I need to clear up with you. And you've worked in a bank, Cam. These banks are not independent. The banks work for the government. The banks, for instance, if a bank decides not to turn up to an auction, a bond auction, they'll lose their customers. Because a lot of these rich customers that have deposits that are banking with these bigger banks are there because they're a primary counterparty.
Yeah,
the big ones. Well, I'm putting to you something here, Cam, that I know it's a big stretch for most people to catch on to. But watch the podcast again and just show me where I got it wrong.
Yeah.
And so
you may as well say the website again.
Cam said that, not me. He told me not to put this up, but I reckon it should be. UniteNZ.org is the Constitution of New Zealand. Download it, it's free. So that's the cost of living.
Educate themselves.
This is what Luxon doesn't know. This is what the Reserve Bank governor doesn't know. What's driving the cost of living and our bills is something that we didn't even know was there. It's these interest payments on these government bonds. But it goes to people who can afford those government bonds. There's a wealth disparity in New Zealand. And people think, oh, it's because they're lazy bastards. No. There's a systemic issue in there too, whereas if you get to a certain point, you can buy a treasury security, you're golden. All the Reserve Bank has to do is raise the interest rate.
The old saying, he who has the gold rules.
Yeah.
It's the golden rule.
Yeah. So now, but the key here is that what will come to our viewers' minds is that this guy's just going to go printing. That's the natural reaction, because we're not used to being a government. We're used to being a business or a household that's tightening their belt strap, right? So the point I'm making here around the operations is the economic flagship of this constitution I'm presenting is price stability, reducing the cost of living.
Price stability eliminates inflation.
Yeah, that's the key insight that Unite New Zealand presents to you that none of the others know about. So quite the opposite. At the moment, what we're doing now is causing inflation. What I'm presenting is the remedy. But what most people don't know is the stuff that we've taken the time to talk about, they're not going to even learn that or even take the time to even understand it.
They'll understand it because we're not taught these subjects anymore in school at the levels that we were taught.
Economists know nothing about money. Nothing.
Accountants know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. So between accountants and economists, we're fucked.
So what I'm saying, the conventional knowledge that we used to, these gurus, you get the guys on, remember the 6 o'clock news? They used to get the guy from ASB, the securities guy, to talk at the end of the news, right?
I can remember back in the days when they'd have Brian Easton on, all the stuffed shirt sitting there telling us,
here's the price of securities today. Yep, there's your source of inflation. That's the source of inflation. And so by what I'm putting forward to you here is that this is the only way to stabilize prices through operating the monetary operations correctly. I'm not saying I'm going to throw it out. I'm saying we're going to operate it correctly. If you create the money supply, which is what the banks do, but if it's done for the creation of new goods and services, that's non-inflationary. There are other types of spends, no matter how much you spend, is in essence non-inflationary, and an example of that's healthcare.
Yeah.
Because you're keeping consumers and producers alive longer.
Yeah.
But my point around a permanent 0% interest rate is the key. That's the linchpin. And so have a look and show me where I'm wrong. The other option is I just fade off into the background and disappear because you've shown me I'm wrong. The other option from that is we're going to have a better standard of living. So why not have a bloody look?
Well, it's worth a look, isn't it?
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we could end our discussion there.
Yeah, I'm pretty pissed off we haven't got that bloody cigar. Maybe another time.
Another time. Thank you so much for coming on the Good Oil Lee. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to meet you. Thanks, Miss. Awesome.
Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the Good Oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way.